Hi, mythologies people. I hope you're all doing very well. It's time to talk a little bit of Enuma Elish, the Mesopotamian creation story. Man, it's a long way from the lower 48, where we've been reading the creation stories of and the emergence tales of Native Americans, to go to the cradle of civilization, the Fertile Crescent, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and to confront this story of Marduk, basically the grandest of the gods, but not the first. In the beginning, there was chaos, and chaos was called Tiamat, the mother of all gods, the womb of being, salt water, female deity. And there was also Apsu, who was freshwater, the male deity. The mingling of these two starts everything. The way that the world was seen back in the days, if you are in this vast fertile plain between two rivers and you're standing out in the middle of this ground and you're looking around, everything is rounded out. The world seems like it's a disc, and it's topped with a dome. And if you walk and walk and walk and walk and walk, you find that you will eventually get to a bunch of salt water. So there's a disc sitting on top of a disc. On the other disc, the inner disc, the one where you're standing, if you dig down, there's fresh water. There's fresh water, and then there's salt water under a dome. A disc on a disc under a dome. And these were the sort of primordial elements that made up the first generations of gods. Gods like Apsu and Anu and Ea. You read this, and so you know what I'm talking about, that from these primordial things came the elder gods. And they're very fundamental. They're like dispositions that we have. They are like anger. They're like lust. They're like greed. They are like love. These sort of primary ways that we feel, these modes of being that we experience, these are what the oldest gods are. And why are emotions like gods? Well, because everybody feels them. They're beyond our person. They transcend all individuals because they visit us at all times. They visit all human beings at all times. So they're immortal, and they're fundamental, and they're the elder gods. And so Tiamat and Apsu are the sort of like the first parents, the makers of the first culture too, because all of these gods create culture. Well, it isn't long before they start making more and more of these elder gods, and these elder gods become somewhat noisy, and they get a little bit bothersome, particularly to Apsu. And Apsu says we should do something about these noisome, bothersome gods that are running around that I can't get to sleep. And Tiamat says, well, we can't do anything about that. That would be horrible. She has a maternal instinct. She doesn't want to. You know, there's this progression from one generation to the next. There's a progression from one sort of social organization to the next. And if you think about this story, the Enuma Elish, the rise of Marduk, it is the consolidation of many different peoples, tribes, or whatever you want to call the ancient peoples living in the Fertile Crescent. They had slightly different ways of understanding things. They had different customs, they had different gods, they had different rituals. And so what's happening is they're coming together and they're going to coalesce later in time, right? It's happening later in time than the beginnings of all things. In the beginnings, we had the elder gods, but now we have a more sophisticated time. So the old gods are going to give way to the new gods, and that's what Marduk is. And the many separate tribes are coming together and coalescing to make one larger culture, which is going to be called the Sumerian culture, which will later become the Akkadian culture and the the Babylonian culture. So this is the beginning of the making of the first great Western civilizations. It's the coming together around who's going to be the dominant, what is going to be the dominant organization for our people, spiritually, materially, economically, socially, etc. So the origin is Apsu and Tiamat, and they have a disagreement about what's to be done with these later gods that they have created because they're so troublesome. Tiamat says, let's leave them alone. Apsu starts plotting with his vizier, with his counselor, Mumu. They start talking to each other about, well, Tiamat's not going to do anything, but we'll take care of business. But he's overheard. These two are overheard, and they're plotting by Ea and others. And Ea and others come, and they slay Apsu, and they set up the new culture in the dead body, the dead corpse of Apsu. And that's where Marduk, who is to become the greatest of the next generation of gods, is born. This is kind of a factual statement that cultures are constantly changing, that there are old ways and old customs that get outmoded and a new thing comes in its wake. In another way of thinking about it, the gods die and the new gods come and take their place. And so that's what's happening here. So they take care of business, and take care of business. They create this super god, Marduk, and his heart. They made him so perfect that his godhead was doubled. In other words, he was double the strength of all the previous gods who had come. Elevated far above them, he was superior in every way. His limbs were ingeniously made beyond comprehension, impossible to understand. His mind was so great, too difficult to perceive. 4 were his eyes, 4 were his ears. When his lips moved, fire blazed forth. The 4 ears were enormous, and likewise the eyes, they perceived everything. Highest among the gods, his form was outstanding. His limbs were very long, his height outstanding. This is the creation of Marduk. He has more eyes, so he sees more, he sees better, he understands things with the great perception, right? So the multiplying eyes means he's enhanced powers of perception, and the flame that comes out of his mouth, his gift of speech was amazing. So he's fashioned to be the next best thing, because he has greater powers. He should be the one who controls what happens in the future, because he who has the eyes, he who has the speech should be the one in charge, should be the dominant power. Well, Tiamat, she hears about all this. Tiamat, who's chaos, Tiamat, who's the primordial mother. This all gets to her, and she prepares her revenge for the killing of Apsu. And she assembles this army of monsters. She has snakes, dragons, demons, rabid dogs, scorpion men, and the baddest of them all, Kingu, who's almost a dark sort of satanic figure that she takes also as a lover. She is preparing herself for this showdown with the upstarts who have killed Apsu. And eventually it happens that the gods call upon Marduk to, because they're like, oh my God, Tiamat she's up, she's riled, she's assembling this army. This looks like it's the end of us. Let's just stay quiet. Oh, but there is one. Maybe we have this chance. Maybe we can convince this Marduk to go face her in battle. And Marduk's like, well, if that's what you want, I'll do it. But here's what's going to be the deal. If you agree to make me the prepotent figure who rules all, if I get the tablets of destiny, in other words, if I'm the culture controller, if what I say goes after I defeat Tiamat, then you have a deal. Well, they have several councils, and they convene, and Marduk becomes the champion, because the rest of them are thinking he has no chance, because they know what a fearsome creature chaos is. You think that you've slayed something, you think that you can turn your back on an old god, you think that the old ways are gone, but there's something about them that makes them come back. So Marduk assembles all these weapons to take on Tiamat. Listen to the weapons that he brings with himself. It's going to be his combat against Tiamat and Tiamat's army of demons. He has a bow, arrow, a mace, which is like a pointy hammer, right? But it's round. lightning, flames, and a net. The net is the crucial thing. The net is what he wants to ensnare Tiamat with. And the net, if you think about the net, the network of our neurons, the net, the ability to use your superior intelligence, this is something that really a prepotent God should have. The net is going to be very important. And of course, he has his sword. He can summon the tempest, the tornado, the floods. He rides in a storm chariot that he yokes four steeds to, and their teeth carries poison. I mean, he's really ready to go. And he goes and confronts her, and they have this back and forth conversation. And Marduk kind of gets scared at first. And then he says mean things to Tiamat. She's enraged. The battle begins. And of course, Marduk is able to ensnare her in the net. He cuts her open. He splits her apart. He smashes her skull with the mace. And then he basically recreates the world on the inside of the fallen body of Tiamat. And from the blood of Kingu, whom he also slays, the chief demon that Tiamat created to help defend her reign, from the blood of Kingu, the human beings are created. We are created, and we are created with one purpose in mind, and that is to serve the gods. Whew. That's what happens to the mother. The great-great-great-grandmother of Marduk, slayed, split open, smashed, and then turned into the substance of the world and the blood of the demon that she had created to win the battle against the gods. That blood becomes the substance of human beings. Interesting, the sort of dark prince's blood becomes the substance of us. What does that suggest about us? I would just leave you with that thought. And also that we were made to labor for the gods. It's such a far, far place away from the beautiful, world tree of the Iroquois myth where the woman falls through. It's such a long way from the insect people in the fourth world who cannot stop messing around one with the other, the sort of the insect mind that we had. And then we go through this process of evolution with helpers, and we eventually emerge into the world and we find our way around, and so beautiful, so gentle, and yet so acknowledging of the human condition. Here, it's battle. It's overcoming through violence, through gore. Very, very fascinating sort of thing to think about. And it's going to come up again because we're going to read this Epic of Gilgamesh. So if you didn't get the chance to read the Enuma Elish, it's worth it. It's a fast read. There's a lot of names in there, but don't worry about the name of every single god. But some of the gods will come back again. Enlil, Shamash. These gods will come back and join us when we do Gilgamesh. So I've been getting some emails from students. Keep sending them and I will respond. And I hope you're doing well. I will see you on the 20th.